Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Berlin Select Board meeting for Monday, March 6th, 2023. It is 7 o'clock, so I'm calling this meeting to order. I want to remind folks the meetings of this Berlin Select Board are recorded for transmission on both the Berlin Cable Access Channel and YouTube, that your voice and your image and your telephone number may be recorded. Let's see. So we'll start off with approval of the minutes from the 27th.
Motion to approve the February 27th open session meeting minutes.
This second, Peg, or should I?
No, I did. I seconded.
Sorry.
Oh, I couldn't hear you.
Hawkins, aye.
Keefe, aye.
Stone eye.
If there's anyone in the audience who would like to make an open comment, let's see, I gotta get the list of people up. Raise your hands and we can have you recognized. And while we're doing that, we can bring the Chief Shartner forward for his department updates.
Hi, good evening. Are you ready for me?
Yep.
All right. So the month of February, we handled 1,144 calls for service, 13 cases involving criminal charges, 12 motor vehicle crashes, 3 with injuries involved, 76 stops, and 32 citations issued. I'm sure you saw in my press release on February 16th, we're a little busy. We pretty much had most every full-time officer in for an incident down to Rockwell. We were assisted by Marlboro PD, Semlac, and Mass State Police detectives assigned to the District Attorney's Office. There's a little typo in this. There were 6 Berlin officers and approximately 16 other officers from different agencies that assisted us as well. Criminal charges were sought and pending, and I gotta put a good plug in for our regional dispatch. They got us all the resources we needed in a timely fashion. The drone unit, we have 5 officers on the drone unit. One's already licensed, 4 need to be licensed, 2 firefighters, and 1 civilian met on February 20th. They unpackaged all the drone equipment and they registered at the same time. It's kind of like a thing you have to do once you open it up and it knows it's active. That's when your warranty starts. You had 48 hours to get it in there. Officer Plant will be the drone unit leader. She'll be the liaison between the drone unit and their needs and myself. I'm not really a big techie, although I am going to go for my certification for my license as well, just so I can understand how it operates and I can be of assistance if we do have to deploy it. Still waiting on the vehicle. It's been built. It's in the parking lot of the GM plant and they're waiting to ship it. So we're hoping the next few weeks it will be in and we can get that settled away. As far as the ACO, we had 5 calls for the ACO. We handled 3 of them without needing assistance, and 2 of the calls did go to the ACO. To go back on radio antennas, spoke with Modular. Antennas are in. We're still waiting on the cabling to run to our radios. From our radios to the antenna, I guess it's about 1,100 feet of cabling. So we're still waiting for that. I did ask him for a timeline. He was supposed to get back to me by last Friday. And as of tonight, I still have not received an email back. So that's usually not good news. But other than that, relatively a good month, quick month. And I was just, well, actually, I was just here 2 weeks ago, so it's pretty quick for me. So, but just on a side note, I didn't put it in here because I just got the bill. These hybrid cruisers that we have are fantastic, except for 2 of them are out of warranty, and we just had a sensor go, and the sensor alone was $735 installed. And I complained about the price of the sensor, and they chuckled at me and they said, "Wait till the water pump goes." He goes, "You're looking at $4,000. And so I'm like, "Well, is this going to be like a guarantee?" He goes, "Could be." He said, "We've already seen them come in around the 60, 70,000 mile mark. So we'll know in the next probably 6 to 8 months." But I guess the water pumps on hybrids are inside the motor, where typically the water pumps are on the outside, run by a belt. but the pumps on a hybrid are inside the car, inside the motor. So I'm kind of bracing for that. So, but other than that, everything else looks good.
I didn't know those sensors were as expensive as that.
Yeah, when they said it was a sensor, I was thinking, well, a couple $100, $135 for a sensor and $65 to put it in or whatever.
Yeah.
Like a typical O2 sensor. But the sensor was $500 and something dollars, and the labor was another, it was like $595 for the sensor and 130, 135, or 150 for the labor. So I was a little shocked, but this is what happens when you buy new generation cars. So
And I guess the Council on Aging should feel very lucky because they have sensors that have gone in their van and it's still under warranty.
yeah, our warranty expired at 50,000 miles, and we currently have 53 on that car.
Mm.
So
Okay.
Chris, Peg, other questions?
Eric, my favorite question on the animal control, where is she in terms of training and in use of all the templates that you provided for her, even though it looks like police is handling the majority of the calls?
yeah,
Just
so,
want to make sure we don't lose sight of that.
yeah, I've been anticipating a letter from the state. They do their certifications the end of February. I emailed with the lady that runs it for the state. She had told me that that they closed, I believe, on February. What was the Friday? The last Friday of February was the closeout, and that there would be mailing out all the letters from there. I've yet to receive a letter from the state, and we do have a book here at the station waiting to be picked up with all the forms in it.
Okay. Yeah, the last Friday was the 24th. So
Okay.
you're looking at a week and starting to creep into 2.
Yeah. I included Kristen on the email threads with the state.
Okay. And that's when you'll find out if she's up to date on all her training?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then Chief, staffing levels? If I remember, okay, someone is coming back online in March and done their training?
Yeah, March 24th. Jacob graduates from the academy, but then he'll go right into field training. We're hoping he's been doing a lot of I'm not gonna call them ride-alongs, but been in the station a lot, learning our paperwork, learning the do's and don'ts. So I have a feeling his field training should probably be around 8 weeks instead of the ordinary 12. And the officer that's out injured told me at the beginning or the end of last week, the doctor said 4 more weeks. So, but so far we're doing good.
Other questions?
No.
Looks like a short and sweet visit there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye, Eric.
Bye-bye.
Let's go to the town administrator report.
Okay, continued work on the budget and the warrant this week. We actually came in a little bit lower with Assabet. They've revised their assessment to a 21.3% increase, which is down from the 26.4% increase that was initially projected. They did tell us that there was a good chance that may come down, and it did. The reason it is that high is the per pupil increase in enrollment, because that really is a per pupil assessment. So it works a little bit differently, as you all know, than the regional school district. Our health insurance renewal has come in at 10.5%, not budgeted for, but not anticipated. We were hoping it would be lower, and that would be a place where we could pick up a little bit of funding. Unfortunately, our health insurance rates were quite high, so we were actually lucky that there was a cap, or we would have owed more. So good news, bad news, but the insurance advisory committee will be meeting to discuss possible plan redesign options to reduce that increase. Otherwise, that 10% hits the town and the subscribers to the plan. The governor's budget actually came out, not just the draft numbers, and it is the same as the draft numbers, with the 4,671 increase in unrestricted general aid, up from FY23. And we'll talk about the warrant a little bit later. I do actually have some updated good news on the highway road materials bid. We are reviewing them right now, but the numbers look pretty good. We did have 8 companies that responded, and at least one of the low bidders came in even lower than Fred had estimated on the numbers. So that is good. I forget whether that was the paving. I think that was the paving one as opposed to the reclamation, because there were 2 parts to the bid, one for paving and one for reclamation. It also does include, as I mentioned before, the paving at South Cemetery. Recreation Court reconstruction is moving forward. The bids are due this Wednesday for that project. Also have gotten back into the leave accruals project with the new treasurer collector. And basically just continuing to work on a number of matters. 2 things important to note. I did receive a call from the school committee chair today. He asked some questions about how the budget process works. Specifically around if a budget is not approved, because there's been a lot of confusion around that. I had received a partial response from legal counsel along with a document. I went through, I looked at it all, and what I did was I kind of drafted up my understanding of how it would happen. You kind of need a flow chart, because it's sort of, there's so many variables. If this happens, then this happens. But we kind of discussed the process a little bit, and he did ask if I would be willing to attend the school vote tomorrow evening. I did mention that to both Scott Hawkins and Scott Schultz. Scott Schultz from FinCom will be attending along with me. So he may have me speak to a few of those items, and we'll get into the budget a little bit more later. That's all I have for you. Oh, sorry. No, one more thing on the budget. I was thinking, I know we have coffee talk in April, but it might be helpful to have a meeting. And I don't know how we want to do this, but perhaps a budget meeting where once we finalize everything, we go through the budget, and it's just focused on that. And it's more for the residents to be able to come and see and ask questions on the budget. I don't know if that's something that the select board has traditionally done, or if that's something the FinCom does. I've just kind of done almost like an information session. So I just kind of wanted to gauge your interest or opinion on that.
Isn't that kind of what we use the coffee talk in April for?
It's late though. Is it April 17th? Is that the?
Yeah, it's still 3 weeks before you're thinking, Kristen, like doing one before the budget's finalized? Because in some respects it's to go over whatever we think are substantial changes in the budget so people are aware and can ask questions. We typically don't go over it sort of line by line.
No.
Probably tick the 4 or 5 biggest things of note.
Okay.
And
Okay,
talk about,
that works.
And talk about the different warrant articles.
Right.
Oh, do both of them together kind of at the same time?
Yeah.
Like as a town meeting info session?
We don't read them sort of fully. We don't go into each other. Some of the ones that we think are sort of bigger and more worthy of note. And so we select those to go over. And because obviously you don't want to do a mini town meeting, so there aren't votes, but a chance for people to just ask some quick questions on things.
Okay, that works. And that's all I have for you.
So Kristen, on the recreation courts, a couple of meetings ago, I had asked what we were going to do, if anything, about the Brown building. I take it no decision was ever made. I saw a little input that said, hey, we'd like to keep it to store maybe some rec stuff, but no determination, stays up, comes down, anything? Or did it just kind of die on the vine?
No, so the recommendation from Fred was to tear it down. But rec kind of said if we could rehab it and put things in it, that would require money. So it was something I intended to bring back to the board at a future date for discussion. I don't know if that perhaps belongs at capital. I don't have any concept of the cost. If that's something the board is interested in pursuing, I don't know that it can be done on the rehab portion out of the existing budget, because I'm already getting a little concerned that the 150 that we have for the tennis courts is not going to be enough with all of the inflationary increases. But I could see if maybe Fred could get a quote, or we could get a quote on that, if that's something the board is interested in. I just don't know what your pleasure is about rehabbing, tearing down, if you have a preference on it.
Isn't it difficult to rehab something for just holding? Would it just be outdoor things that would be in there, or?
Yeah, so Bob Holmes did say that it would be lockable, having an area for lockable storage would be preferred, like pickleball nets, picnic tables if the pavilion project moves forward, other types of equipment.
Yeah, there's rafters in the storage container that is there next to the Brown building. And I think there's like 5 or 6 other small buildings all around that sort of field area. And so a better sense of potentially what rec needs for storage and finding a better place. I don't think that is a rehabable building.
Okay.
I'm kind of thinking.
And am not also a fan of the, metal container sitting next to it either. And if I could have unrestricted money and time, which I get both are restricted, I would make sort of tearing that down and paving and striping a parking lot there. Not just where that building is entirely, but that's dirt parking that is just not also easy necessarily on people who have some mobility issues as well. And I think that's a project that we started talking about it now. We get some numbers, present to capital for next year's town meeting. I don't think I would try to incorporate it into the current project, because as you point out, that money was really designed for those courts, and I just make it its own project for next year.
Yeah, I could start to kind of get some costs, ideas. We can put it on there on the FY25 plan.
Yeah. Start a new list, Kristen.
Okay, I have many. I will add to it.
And that, Kristen, it's a line on your report, but you and I have also talked about is that our intent to sort of at Maplewood sort of make the process less sort of cumbersome has accidentally resulted in sort of more trucks going up there. The problem in
Right.
some respects, if I understand it correctly, is that the agreement the town made originally with Riverbridge gave them a sort of amount of soil that can be brought up, and they're not even 10 years later halfway through that list.
Yeah, so I've been actually gathering information. I've spoken with Lighthouse, their LSP. I've spoken with DEP. I've spoken with the independent third party, and I was hoping to bring it back to you in a memo form at the meeting Monday night. But basically, the gist of it is there's a certain amount of soil that can be brought in to bring it to the grade. So it's not a time limitation, it's a grade limitation. And it's, I believe, a 3% grade is the number. I'm still checking on those figures, but according to DEP, if I have the number in my head correctly, they can bring in about 382,000 cubic yards of soil, and they've brought in about 169,000 as of 2 weeks ago. So when I met with the Johnstons, they let me know they were running anywhere from 18 to 24 months at the current rate. We have actually sped up a bit with Weston and Sampson, and they have told me that they can, do 48-hour turnarounds whenever possible. They can't commit to doing it every time, but they will do it as much as they can. And the Johnstons had let DEP know that they're on more of like a 12 to 18 month turnaround to get it done. So the unintended consequence is more trucks, but it does mean that the project is moving along towards completion.
Kristen, the general question, and I know it's come up a few times as I listen to historical meetings where they're talking about the need for ADA parking spaces. By any chance, are those parking spaces part of the budget, the information for highway, or they just didn't like get in time to say, hey, can you add in the cost of a couple spaces? Because I know when I checked it out, I was given a cost of approximately $7,000 in ADA space because it's a size, it's striping, it's the pole, it's the sign with that. So just didn't know if historical was able to hop on the bandwagon and have efficiency, with that.
Is over at the rec courts?
No, so at the Bullard House, they've been talking about additional
Sorry.
ADA spaces, so I just didn't know if they could almost like intertwine the cost of those parking spaces with whatever Fred is doing for, hot top and things like that.
Was this for additional spaces, which maybe they have to make?
I think it's the 1870 town hall parking spaces.
Well, there's only one there, and historical was talking about two, but I don't know. So the question was, were they able to get in on this potential, costs, efficiency of costs, where we're looking at doing some repaving, and that could almost like come in with it compared to, hey, we just need 2 spaces and the cost is exorbitant and through the roof.
Do they have a place to pave though? That's what I mean.
Right.
Don't know. I mean, that's
don't
back on them. I mean, there's the spot at the top of the hill, there's the space down below by the church. But I don't know where.
I think they were
Another
thinking
spot
up on
could
the
be.
hill. And I
Right.
don't think there is a space to pave yet.
Yeah, there's one, but it's not striped, it just has a sign. No, I just didn't know if they were able to get on it, get in with it rather than having to go out for 2 spaces, which I'm sure are extremely cost prohibitive compared to, hey, here's all this stuff that we're gonna do, you just become a little part of it.
So the projects had to be pre-approved by Mass DOT.
Okay.
Because we had to give actually a cost estimate to the contractors. I can ask the question to the state and see if it's possible.
I'd also like to know, maybe I've missed where they're talking about, because the only parking there is 1870 Town Hall that was supposed to be paved as part of the elevator project, but when the elevator project ran out of money,
Yeah.
they got approval to do it just as crushed stone. And although there's been definitely people who would love it to be paved, I don't think it's ever made it high enough on a list of current projects to be ready.
It comes up frequently on their meetings, so I figured, they're talking about, I listen in, toss it out. It goes great, if not great, just throwing it out there.
With the funding source, are you talking about like using Chapter 90?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I can look into that.
and again, where the spot's gonna go, don't know, not my call, but just asking, again, efficiency, for funding.
Sure.
Chris, do you have questions, comments on the town administrator report?
No, I'm just trying to remember about the parking spots. I think it was something to do with a change in the project, and there wasn't any room to put additional parking spots up there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can reach out to Barry.
Actually,
Uh,
wouldn't it be, June, since she's the chair?
June? Sure.
June Miller, yeah.
Will do.
Old business, fiscal year 24 budget.
Okay. So I have some exciting things for you this evening. I think we're very close on the budget, very close to being final on this budget. And this is the budget I intend to show to FinCom this week, provided I have your approval on it. I'm going to share this. Give me one moment. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay. So, I'm bouncing back and forth between my spreadsheet and the PDF, so, just have to forgive me. Is it, oh, did it pause or can you still see it?
We can see the first page up.
Okay, perfect. So basically where we're at, we've really gone over the revenue projections and, projected them as closely as we possibly can. As we talked about before, we did a large capture of local receipts when we did the FY23 recap. And that was a big shift because if you go down to line 4 under the revenue category here at the, I can draw on it. Whoops, then you can't see it. Line 4 under local receipts, we had estimated taking 1.4 in local receipts. And then when the shift happened and the mall was devalued by $1 million and that excess had to be borne by the taxpayers, the residential taxpayers, we went back and took a really close look at local receipts and what had come in. And I'm going to just scroll down to the next page. Don't get dizzy. So looked at FY22 local receipt actuals, which came in at this 14. This is not highlighting very well. There we go. This 14,580,099. And we had actually budgeted for 891,600. So we went back and looked and said, okay, can we estimate a little more closely on local receipts when we do the recap? Because what's going to happen is that would flow to free cash. And I didn't feel comfortable saying, okay, well, we have money that we're leaving on the table that's flowing to free cash, but we're going to ask the taxpayers for more. So that's why I gave June a heart attack. And we worked through all the local receipts and did a much tighter estimate. So you can see we went up to almost 1.2 million out of what we captured in FY22, which is 1.45. So when we went to look at FY24, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. It was basically a one-time base adjustment on the local receipts. So some went up a little, some went down based on our revenue projection or based on our revenue numbers after 7 months of FY23. So you're basically netting, a total of about $5,000 on local receipts. So not a big revenue change there because that big shift happened back in FY23. So what happens there is since we took less in taxes last year, if we want to stick to the 2.5% number that we've been discussing, since the beginning, that's actually a lower number because you're basing it now off of this number, the $12 million number. I don't know why this is highlighting funny, but based off of the $12 million number instead of the $13 million number. So we definitely, shifted in terms of what we can take in revenue. And I think that as we talk about excess levy, as we talk about the school's request, one of the things that I've said all along to the select board and the FinCom is the town's budget has been prepared within that 2.5%. That's what we asked the departments to do. We, if there were fixed costs that were over 2.5%, they had to justify them. And actually, they really had to justify any increase to any department because they had to go through and prepare an expense line item, expense budget line item by line item that was presented to the FinCom. So really any increase FY23 to FY24 had to be explained. So I don't want it to seem like all departments went up 2.5%. That was basically our guideline. Where there were fixed increases that went up over 2.5, we expected departments to try to reduce where they could to offset that. So there wasn't an overall increase of more than 2.5. So basically I took the recap number under local property tax of this $12 million and we did our 2.5 that we've been talking about, plus our anticipated new growth of 350,000, which gives us our revenue numbers. Our state aid numbers are unlikely to change. The House and Senate sometimes come in with slightly higher numbers, but we always base it off of the governor's budget. Local receipts, as I just said, are calculated as tightly as they can be. Offset receipts, that's transfer station. receipts reserved for appropriation would be ambulance receipts and the cemetery receipts. And then our other revenue sources, if we go down to page 2, would be one of the variables in terms of what we put in for free cash for BMS and Tohoto Capital. Also what we take out of public safety stabilization. So those are basically what consist of our other revenue sources. And then the affordable housing account, which we took less this year because we actually were able to account for a lower cost for that. And then we have our obligations, our state charges that come off, and our debt exclusions. So basically what we have right now is a level funded budget at $15,861,148 in revenue and $15,861,147 in expenditures. And that leaves just shy of 1.9 million in excess levy capacity. So within that 2.5% and new growth, basically I backed into what we had left over for the schools, which results in a 5% increase. And I'll scroll down and show you those line items. So basically, after we did our departments, we looked at everything with FinCom. There are a couple line items that are still, kind of to be decided. And there's a couple I'm going to ask if you can vote on this evening. But overall, everything is pretty well set within a couple of thousands of dollars. And 5% is really the number that I feel this budget can bear. Looking at kind of historical trends over the years, we've hovered anywhere between around that 4 to 5%. I think one year it might have gone as high as 6%. This is really what we can do. Now, I think most of you just attended the joint FinCom presentation. The school is now presenting a 14% level services budget and a 9% below level services budget. So one of the things that I did was to run the numbers to see what it would mean for us to go from 5% to 9% or from 5% to 14% and what that would mean for the taxpayers. So I just want you guys to keep in mind that these numbers are very rough. They're using FY23 tax rate numbers. They do not take into account any additional commercial devaluation, which could make them increase. But these are the ballpark estimates that we can come up with as best right now. So basically, to get from a 5% to a 9%, we would need another $261,000, which would result somewhere around $150 to $175 for the average single family home, which the state sets at $558,000. Now that's just an average for a single family residential. If we were to go to 14, we would need to tap into another $588,719 in excess levy. That brings us around $350 to $375 for the average single family home assessed at $558. Now, it's important to keep in mind that those numbers go above and beyond what your regular increase is. So when you're looking at your 2.5% and new growth, that is already a base increase of around $400 for your average single family home assessed at $558. So if you were to go 9%, you're adding another $150 to $175 on top of that. And if you were to go 14, you're adding another $350 to $375 on top of that. And then their above level services budget was 22%. And since they haven't taken their vote yet, I did put that one in just to see what that would be. To get to the 22% above level services budget, would need another $1.1 million. That would add another $650 to $675 on top of the $400 base increase. So I hadn't really had much of a chance to walk the board through all of these revenue numbers. So I just wanted to take a minute to do that. I can answer any questions you guys might have.
So just a comment. I think it's going to be really important to see what Boylston does in this situation.
Yep.
And especially in regards to Tohoto, because whatever they can afford, we just do the other 1/3. And, it may sort of end up not being 5 and 5. It might be, we might have to play around with those numbers.
Sure. And we can do that. One thing to note, I had a conversation with school administration about moving some items out of the operating budget that were really capital items and putting them in capital, so that they could lower the assessment. It appears that they upped capital but didn't lower the assessment. So they're now asking for about $450,000 in capital for Berlin Memorial, and they're asking for over $600,000 in capital for Tohoto. And just for reference, last year they got $68,000 in capital for Berlin Memorial. And if I'm looking at this number correctly here, because last year the debt was rolled in with the capital, so it looks like they got about $11,000 in capital for Tohoto. So you're talking about $1 million they're requesting in capital. We have $3 million total in free cash.
Remember the days when we used to have them do an article for every item that they wanted in capital?
Yep.
I think we were saving money then, weren't we? I don't think it was this high.
Well, it's hard to know if they've not done a sort of 5-year capital plan, whether or not, this 448,000 for Berlin Memorial is an aberration, or was the 68,000 an aberration? Like if they average 200,000 a year, then maybe we can, sometimes make that work. I just, I was listening to their presentations. I have their slide deck up in front of me, and just so many things just don't tie together, where they give you some subtotals. Like they early on talk about $1.3 million increase in special ed, except their history of special ed and out-of-district placement slide. Berlin in 23 is 940,000, and 24 it's almost 1.1 million, and Boylston is 1 million going to 1.2 million. That's 200,000 on each side. That's 400,000. That doesn't come to 1.4 million. Like, where is the other million coming from? Their slide that talks about,
Isn't that their entire increase then?
They said that what their biggest driver of increase is special ed. And so they
Yeah,
did this slide
50%.
that pulls it out, and their special ed isn't going up by much.
But it's 50% of the increase is what they said. Does that make sense?
Their starting slide was that special ed is going up by 1.4 million.
Well, then I don't know.
And so that doesn't tie out. It just, the numbers just, every time I try to get the details behind numbers, their details and their totals don't add. And so I don't know what number to believe. And so if I don't know what number to believe, I'm just going to give them a nice, I'd be 5% increase, and they can figure out how to spend it. And I think for me, it's 5% across everything, capital and everything, 5% more, make it work.
Yeah.
Because
And
they
it
talk,
would
because
be really nice to request a 5-year plan. If they have this many things they need, then they need to figure out how they're going to spread it out over 5 years.
They did give a 3-year plan to capital.
and then pushed all of it into year one.
Yeah, I don't see.
Because the original 3-year
plan
plan
in
put
here.
their routers and switches, which I'm in that industry. I get those things go bad, and sometimes you hope for more time out of them than you get. But that they gave a 3-year plan and then pushed everything into year one.
Well, I still like the truck that they can't afford, but there it is. Well, and the big thing, Kristen, with the numbers that you provided, I'm sure all of us got bombarded with letters, rightfully so, from parents and PTO type boards in support of the school committee's budget. I think the missing picture is the impact to taxes, because of course, if money was no object, of course you'd want the best education for the kids in town.
But the
Absolutely.
best education doesn't necessarily go with how much you spend.
I
No, and
understand
Berlin
that.
already spends 20% more than the state average in Berlin Memorial per pupil.
Right.
And their per pupil in 23 is going from 21,000 to 26,000. And so that's just a huge increase. So in
I can
cost
see
per student.
why. I can see why. I mean, just the history of while I was on school committee was that Boylston Elementary was always the loser, the one that got the least amount of money.
Oh, yeah. Slides
Every
18 and
single
19.
time.
Yep.
How low their per pupil cost is. It's below the state.
Yep.
That's embarrassing.
Right.
But the big thing is to get the message out to the people, because that, from all the emails that I've read, you know, over the past
I don't
week,
get it.
there hasn't been like one mention. And of course, you want to write back, but you don't,
No,
because you can't.
no.
And, you know, the response would be as simple as, yes, I understand. Yes, I hear you. Are you able to come up with an additional $375 for taxes? Are you able to come up with an additional $675 in taxes? That to me is the missing piece. So
Maybe-
as selectmen, we whether it's in coffee talk or whether it's a pre-coffee talk or something, that is the message that has to get out, because parents are just hearing, oh my God, you're shafting the schools. You know, we're not giving them this, we're not giving them that. It's like, hey, I'd love to, but you know what? Again, a third of the town is elderly. I'm sure if you hit them even with a $175 increase, it's going to hit them hard. So, but that just seems to me the missing information that is not getting out to the parent base, that you want this, that's great. Are you willing to pay for it?
Well, and just because maybe they can afford that kind of increase, then what about everybody else?
Correct.
Right.
And that's why I'm saying, and that's the thing that needs to come out, is to say, Kristen, exactly as you presented it. If we do 5%, it means this more in taxes. If we do this percent, it means this more. And again, these aren't, you know, I don't want, you know, hard fact figures, because I don't want somebody coming back saying, you said it was $175 and my taxes went up by 239.
Right.
Estimate. This is an estimate, but that information needs to somehow get out to the majority of people that just don't hear it, that just don't get,
Yeah.
your
Well, and
taxes are gonna go up.
I
You know,
think
they've
as a-
already gone up and they're gonna go up again. So,
And as a town, we have been generous to the schools. Our
Yes, we
increase in
have.
schools has been above the rate of inflation for years. You know, and this is what I said when we had the joint meeting last time, is that I think we said, oh my goodness, this 7 to 9% is just not sustainable. Can you slow it down some? And they said, yeah, we'll slow it down. How about 20%? You know, they present a giant budget in late January, and we say, oh my goodness, that's great. They talk about all the amount of money they've cut, and then they say, oh yes, but it's going to be more now. So we spent 6 weeks cutting our budget, and we're now asking for more money as a result of all of our cuts. It is just
There's been no cuts though, right? We have, you know, in this.
well, from
There's
from
been
their
no
proposed
cut, yeah.
from their proposed budget, their original proposed budget, they talk about all things they've removed from the proposed budget, and yet their
Yeah.
total is still higher than it was before they did all those removed things from their budget. You know,
Yeah.
they moved things to the capital budget, making it huge, but the number of their operating budget didn't go down.
Mhm.
And sadly, I mean, I'm not on FinCom anymore, but like, there's not a breakdown of their budget. I just know I know their totals, but how is it being spent? They say it's gone on to special ed, but I don't see a line that said in this year, special ed has gone from this to that, because again, they talk about 1.4 million, and yet their totals don't come to that.
So Kristen, do you have a meeting with the FinCom on Wednesday night?
I do, yes.
Okay, so, you know, the way we vote tonight, I'm sure you'll be sharing it with them.
Yep.
And then can you at least share with us what direction they're going to go?
Absolutely. And then I appreciate you indulging me in that opening explanation. That is similar to the discussion that I had with Mike Topman when he called today. And that is what he asked if I could speak about that, and also the process for approval potentially at the school committee meeting tomorrow. So I just believe, in the interest of openness and transparency, that information should be out there and folks should have it so that they can make the best informed decision that, that they want to make.
There was a year where we had one member from Boylston who made us go line by line through the budget and say yay or nay whether we would allow that increase. And we were even cutting out things like socks for athletic teams. I mean, it can get very sad, if you're pushing and then you end up having to cut. So it would be, I hope we can all come to agreement on something that both towns can afford.
Right. And just a quick overview on the process. And like I said, I am confirming this with legal counsel, but my understanding from everything I've read and everybody that I've talked to, and there are some variables in here, but basically the school committee will pass a budget tomorrow evening, is slated to be passed. That budget does need to go in our warrant. We are also able to have a FinCom recommended budget if it's different. I need to figure out exactly the logistics of how that vote takes place then, because initially, I believe you guys have had KP for 12 years now, I think.
Quite a few.
Yeah, Janelle said since she's been on board, this hasn't happened. So there was a little bit of research that has to come into play, because the budget she always received, from Margaret and from the FinCom beforehand had an agreed upon number. So there weren't two different budgets that were being presented in the warrant. So that has to be worked out a bit. But basically,
there's always been a recommended, there's always been a requested column followed by a recommended column.
Okay.
And so the school board's going to request their request, and that we as a town, FinCom Select Board, going to have what we're going to recommend the taxpayers vote on. And the motion will start off by saying, this is the motion as recommended by the Select Board and FinCom. And the people are allowed, it's my understanding, allowed to make amendments up to the amount that was originally, the amount that was in the requested budget.
That is my understanding as well. I've just heard a few different variations on that, so I wanted to confirm it, Scott. But I'm glad you said that, because that's where I'm at with my understanding. So, it
was one of the FinCom frustration is not quite the right word. Is that at the end of the day, you're right, Chris. Almost all the time, these school requests are actually across the board. The requested budget and the recommended budget were the same. That betrayed the fact that there was a month and a half of wrangling where a lot of people, put a lot of effort in to get those two numbers to agree. And it looks like when people say, well, FinCom's never cutting anything because their recommended budget's the requested budget. And it's like, well, but that's because we all worked hard to get to a requested budget that works.
And I wish we could do that this time. And I have to say, we've worked very hard, and we've had a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings. Unfortunately, at this time, we are just both so far apart. So it is really going to come down to the voters.
And so it's a side thing for the moment, but we should try to really make sure there is decent and adequate childcare coverage during town meeting this year, so that parents who want to come and be part of the presentation don't have to choose, that have some good coverage for their children, so they can feel comfortable coming to town meeting.
And I think that we need to publish even harder our coffee talk. I was kind of amazed at the number of attendees at the joint meeting tonight. And after I took us out and I took finance out, there were maybe 6 names that I didn't recognize. And I'm thinking, where are the parents from both towns? Maybe they'll show up tomorrow. I don't know, but.
Yeah, I think there were a few though.
There were a few, but there weren't as many as I thought that they would be. We're given, the contention of this for the past couple of weeks and emails floating around. So I was just surprised that there were not more.
That might have been one of those meetings that wasn't advertised as fully as, say, for tomorrow night will be. Or yeah. So are
I
you
know-
looking for a motion, Kristen?
I was looking to go over a couple line items if we could, Scott.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, since the school board hasn't formally made their recommendation, either is FinCom, I don't know if whether, I feel we might be too soon, that our opinion should be, I think, after both of those get a chance to vote. I think we have made our opinions known, both last week's meeting and in other stuff. And so, but yes, Kristen, the other stuff that you would like us to look at.
Yeah, there are a couple of line items that you haven't voted on yet, and the FinCom did not want to take a vote without a vote from the select board first. They
That's
wanted
why I
to-
wondered about the school budgets too. Is this, the FinCom made me curious as to how we're feeling as far as a vote on the schools.
We'll go down the budget, and when we get to that, we'll figure out where we want to go, because it could be we vote on a number. We could also just vote on a statement that we send them as well. There, I think, a variety of things we could do.
Okay. All right, the first is a change to line 17. This was discussed with personnel and with the FinCom. There was a 90-day wage adjustment in the in an offer letter that was given to the assistant in the office, and it was to take effective July 1 of FY24, provided there was a positive evaluation after 90 days. So that was something that was not originally included in the budget process, but it has been added in. That would be an additional cost of $1,036 to fulfill that. It was basically a letter. I wasn't familiar with it. It was signed by the Board of Assessors and by Margaret.
Has this person been here a year?
No,
Then why are they getting a raise? Because how fair is that to other people who have not been here a year and they're not getting a raise?
because it wasn't a step increase. It wasn't a merit increase based on being there for a year. It was in their offer letter that they would be reevaluated after 90 days. And that
Was the evaluation done at 90 days?
I can't tell you exactly when it was done. The assessors came to the personnel committee meeting and said that the evaluation was done and that it was a positive evaluation, and they recommended a step.
So this was something that went through personnel in the first place with Margaret.
Correct.
Okay, so.
But it is also, Christian, one of those things where there are town employees that do not report through you. They report to another elected body or board. And so when they
Right.
make agreements, we are sometimes stuck with what agreements they make.
Right. And I would say for the future, I would make those very clearly spelled out, what the step would be. When we do our highway letters, we say after 90 days, based on, positive evaluation, you would go to X step. This one was a little more complicated. It didn't have the step in there. And so that was one thing personnel commented on and wanted fixed going forward. So we will make that change.
So when had the assessors presented their budget and then all of a sudden came back around with, oh, look what we forgot?
So they had requested this step increase, but they initially requested it as a FY22 merit increase, which the employee would not qualify for because they had not been here for a year. So they then came back and presented the letter that it was a 90-day increase. There was a little bit of confusion around that.
But they didn't, when did they notify you, Kristen? Because I'm just curious. Yes, I know Margaret signed it. I get it. But should this not have been brought to your attention a lot earlier than now? And I understand that the cost is minimal. However, to me, this is more principle and procedure, that because it was written in, this person who has been here less than a year, but yet we tell everybody else, you got to wait a year. How is this person getting a reward for doing their job? Have they gone above and beyond? I mean, we don't see the evaluations. You do, understandable. And I know that personnel, I don't think they see them either. But to me, if you're getting a bump, that means you're extraordinary. Every single day, you are extraordinary for getting an increase after 90 days. This does not sit well with me.
So, yeah, this was actually, and because it didn't have the specific step increase, it went back and forth with the principal assessor. And I ultimately had to go based on what the understood intent was of that letter, as I was not here at the time. My understanding is that the employee would go up a step following a 90-day positive evaluation. I did not want to negatively impact that employee just because the letter was written in a way that was a little bit of a gray area. And I agree that it should have been done earlier. But I did express that at personnel, but I didn't want to ultimately penalize the employee because that was what they were hired based upon.
So once in a while, we do things where we have an employee that we would really like to bring on, and they may say, I'll come if I get an extra week of vacation.
Yep.
And that, if we think it's worthwhile, then we do that. But that may be sort of what happened with the assessors too.
Right. So, and in the town administrator bylaw, and I know this isn't specifically a town administrator position, but I think that it was worked together between the board and Margaret. It does allow them to set compensation packages. And obviously the board does have to approve it. And so this went through the Board of Assessors.
So you said that the evaluation was positive. Do you have the evaluation, Kristen? Can you pick it up physically in your hand with specific examples
I
on
do
this
not.
person? I'm sorry, what?
No, I do not.
Okay.
And again, Christian, this person is not in a chain of command that reports to you.
Correct. So the assessors came before the personnel committee directly and asked for this.
And as we pointed out before, this is, and there will be a bigger conversation on budget ones, but that when independent boards make independent decisions, there's little both either the select board or town administrator can do about it.
Well, it does appear to have been a joint decision in this case, though, between the town administrator and the Board of Assessors. They both had signed the offer letter. So I know it's a tricky one, and I understand that. I just did not feel comfortable because perhaps of an administrative error on our end penalizing that employee.
I don't think it's an administrative error on our end, Kristen. It's administrative error on the assessors. That they were
Sure.
supposed to do this, that they should have put this. So it goes back to I'm not going to point a finger, but if this was agreed upon and after 90 days, it was supposed to swing into play and no written evaluation was provided, this clearly falls on the head of the assessors and why this wasn't done.
Well, I mean, maybe the goal here is that just having better communication then.
I agree with you, Peg, and I agree with what you're saying, and I want to fix it going forward. I think that everything should be very clearly outlined as to exactly what it means. And I would argue too that it, after, positive 90-day review, I don't know that it says it has to be a written performance evaluation. So it needs to be clearer. I agree with you.
Okay, so that was the wages part-time assessor.
That's the wages part-time for the assessor. So that's an additional $1,036 to make that adjustment.
Okay,
So this 69,897 number.
It is correct. The 69,897, excuse me. As you had previously looked, that number previously did not include the 1,036. So you had previously voted on 68,861.
okay. And what are the treasurer collector expenses?
So that's actually a reduction slightly. It's excuse me, that I was able to make. So Paul and I sat down and we looked at how much the deputy collector fees, if you remember, I had added an extra $6,500 for the deputy collector fees because we were concerned about how much those would be, and they weren't accounted for in the FY23 budget. So we looked at the first 7 months of FY23 and we felt comfortable raising that by $5,500 instead of $65. I will take $1,000 wherever I can get. So that's actually a reduction.
Okay.
Legal is a recommended reduction as well to get us to a balanced budget. I was comfortable with 75. FinCom and the select board originally recommended 80,000, and that was what the original vote was on. And I apologize, the way I have the formulas, it updates it with mine because I didn't want anything to get crossed over. But originally the vote was on $80,000. So I did make that reduction back to 75 with the understanding that the reserve fund is increasing by $15,000 should there be an issue. I've also been, we can discuss this too, I believe at our next meeting, but I have been in conversations with a legal firm that has given us a better rate.
Okay.
So I do feel comfortable lowering that number.
Mhm.
The Conservation Commission, that one, just a decision has not been made. FinCom was waiting to see what the select board felt about it. We did revise the job description. I took it to personnel. They did approve a revised, more robust job description that would cover the 4 hours. I just have budgetary concerns with what we're facing with the schools right now. Initially I had included it. This budget does not include it because of trying to balance the health insurance increase. Neshoba Valley went up another 2.5%. There's just a number of increases we had that were fixed, that unfortunately this was one of the first supplemental funding requests that I felt would have to go.
Okay, so it was higher because they wanted more hours and that's not included now?
So they wanted this extra $6,220 in their supplemental funding request.
Okay.
So and this hasn't been voted on at all because everybody's been going back and forth on it. The
So we're
level funding request is the
5?
2.5% increase of the 12,081. So the question is whether or not we can fund the supplemental funding request. And as much as I would like to do it and I see value to it, unless we get some other type of adjustment coming from ASABIT or the schools, I just don't see where we have the funding for it right now.
And this position reports to you, Kristen?
It does, as I've learned. So yes, I've met recently with Maddie and with Carolyn.
And have you shared this information with them?
So no, I apologize. I have not.
Okay.
We hadn't made a full decision on it yet. We were going back and forth, and this is just the budget that we updated today, or I updated over the weekend. So if that's the direction that the select board wants to go in, I will certainly speak with her.
Well, I didn't have a problem with the increase because you shared with us that you thought that the 4 hours could include things like taking minutes, where Peg was concerned about that. That maybe it is important, I think, to have accurate minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see it back in there, when ASABIT takes their final vote on the budget, if there is any leeway, that would be the first one I think that I would put back in. So this, at this time, it's probably best to hold off on it. I do see the value in it. I mean, I see the value in a lot of things that unfortunately we're not able to fund in this budget. That it's,
Well, I know when could be legal issues, it is important to have good minutes.
Yep, absolutely. And also to look at more like grants and moving her towards more of the enforcement on the NOIs and moving that away from a volunteer board and committee and actually having a trained staff person doing that. She does need some additional training from what I understand to do that. So that would be a good thing to have as well.
So we're voting on a 2.5% increase for this line item.
That's what it is now. And if we're able to put more back in, we can hold off on it if you want. It's up to you all.
What is the goal to get this budget completed?
So the schools haven't taken their votes yet, but they will be taking them later on this week, I believe. So I'm hoping we can get finalized next week.
Okay. I don't know when it is. You have to have this sent to the
See-
principal and all that.
My bias would be to approve the 4 recommended changes here, knowing that we could vote to change them next week, especially if on 36 FinCom is much waiting for us, someone, probably us, to make the first move.
Mhm.
Right.
Let's make a first move. And I think, Kristen, you have it right, is that adding 4 hours here, I know it's, 6,000 when the schools are talking about millions, but that at least as we sit right now, where the school's looking like they're not going to come down to 5%, that we just leave it at 12,081 for conservation commission part-time wage. At least that's my bias at the moment.
I mean, your other option you have is you could take the 6,220 out of one of the 5% increases for the school budget.
I think it's just cleaner to leave it this way.
Okay.
And then we'll decide what to do with that 6,220 after.
Okay.
And
Oh.
if I hear Peg, then you have a concern on 17 still, right? With the wages part-time for the assessor,
Yeah, I'll be voting no on line 17.
right? Do you have an alternate? What would you rather us do?
The ultimate is follow the process. The process wasn't followed, and though I can feel for the employee, I get it, but this seemed to be like something of, oh my God, hey, look, I found this piece of paper, I forgot, so we need to put it in there. And especially Kristen, where you confirmed you have no written evaluation, where I'm sure if I asked, oh, do you have an evaluation for insert person name here, you could say yes and wave it around. So why are we making a concession on this that does not follow process or procedure? I hate penalizing the person, but I hold the assessor's office fully accountable for that. So the fault is not on us.
Right, but if even if they're fully accessible, if we don't pass it, then the employee is the one who gets penalized for it.
Right.
I understand that, but Scott, and I'm not going to get argumentative because last week was kind of ugly and want to avoid it. But I'm just saying, if you make an exception, and you make an exception today for this line item, and then next year there's another line item, and someone's going to say, but you did it last year, why can't you do it this year? So no, I'm sorry.
If Kristen was
So-
able to say, the board was not particularly happy with this, so we need to have better communication. I'm not saying change your vote. I'm just saying
Right.
that would be optimal for me. That I don't
Correct.
care.
I
I mean,
just-
that,
The
That
person who
discussion
feels
needs
the
to
pain of following it is going to be the employee who feels the pain, not the Board of Assessors. And potentially having an employee quit on us is way more expensive when we go back on a written document they have.
yeah, no, and
But,
the communication definitely needs to happen, with this. You did not follow process and procedure. You need to explain to me why, not me, global me, but, no,
I think we
I'm
also.
sorry.
So-
It's a no.
so
I'm-
Chris, how about a motion then for approve the TA recommended lines for lines 23, 24, and 36, which is treasurer, collector expenses, which went down, legal expenses went down, and conservation commission at sort of just the 2.5% cost of living and not the added hours.
I was going to make my motion for line item 17, 23, 24, and 36 at the 2.5.
Yeah, I was hoping for a separate one just so that Peg doesn't put in a weird spot where she looks like she might be voting against legal expenses too. That makes it quite clear that Peg is
Yeah.
fine with the other lines and not just that one. So I just do it. I think it to be nicer, it's to do it as two.
Oh,
separate
okay.
ones.
Do it separately. Okay.
Yep.
Do you want me to just do 17 separately?
Yeah, so do 17 first, and then we'll do the other. Sure.
Okay, so I'd make a motion for approval of line item 17.
which is the 69,897, which is that added 1,000 plus
Right.
piece. I will second that. I think we discussed it a chunk. Hawkins, aye.
Keith, aye.
Stone, no.
Yep. And then Chris, the other three then.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion for line item 23, 24, and 36 at the 2.5%.
Yep.
Seconded.
I think we're ready to vote on that one too. Hawkins, aye.
Keith, aye.
Stone, eye.
Okay. All right. The other orange is my change color. So public safety, we talked about the supplemental funding request, and I know that the select board, I had recommended funding the supplemental funding request in full. The select board voted to fund the half-year salary for the full-time day officer, to make sure I say that correctly, but not the evening sergeant at this time. In going back and looking over this and talking about it with June, mitigation funding is new for me. I spoke with the chief as well and looked at where his calls are coming from, where his increases are coming from, and they are coming largely from incidents that are occurring at Highland Commons and at Riverbridge. So June is on board. If the select board wants to take that money out of the budget, I have pulled it out of the budget right now and put it into public safety mitigation funding temporarily, pending your consideration and what your thoughts might be on it.
Sorry, I don't quite follow. The expenses are the expenses, just where the revenue comes from. Because usually when we do the public safety line item, we say, you know, it's $2.5 million with X coming from taxes and Y coming from public safety mitigation. And so.
Right, but before it was all coming from taxes.
It's
Right.
every year we have taken money out of public safety mitigation to pay for the police department budget.
Right,
Portions of it.
this would be additional. So there was two, so if I go back to revenue, just scroll back up. So originally we had, I believe it was just shy of 220,000 coming out of public safety stabilization. So what got moved was that supplemental funding request into public safety stabilization. So now you see 262,297 instead of it coming out of the taxation portion, it can come out of public safety stabilization.
That sounds good to me.
And that's sustainable because this is a half-year position. And so if we take stabilization money out for this year, that means there's 80,000 next year that we have to come up with an added increase. Which is
Correct.
a serious chunk of our 2.5%.
40,000
before the year starts.
Right, so that would have to come out of, that could come out of mitigation as well. Highland Commons has an in perpetuity mitigation amount, which is why after speaking with June, I would feel comfortable taking that out of there.
Right.
Depending on how the board feels about it.
When it was first put together, the belief was that it was always going to be for capital items and that we weren't going to use it for ongoing operations. It's never really been the case, but the intent was that when we do when we next need a fire truck, $1 million+ fire truck, that wouldn't necessarily come out of free cash or loans. It would actually come out of public safety mitigation.
Okay, right now my understanding is it's for personnel. The 200 and some odd thousand that's been going in a year has been going in for personnel.
Right, even though we're trying hard not to do that. And so you're increasing the amount of money that is no longer available for capital replacement.
So it's just been offsetting a portion of the personnel or the salaries.
Right. Well, and one thing you could look at is we do have a larger than usual free cash number this year that you could look at for capital, but it's kind of, it's really comes down to a choice. I don't typically, mitigation money is a new one for me. I don't typically like funding salaries ever out of one-time funds, but given the fact that Highland Commons is that ongoing one, I was more comfortable. And I do see the free cash to do a little more capital this year than we've been able to do in the past. But again, that's one time, so that's not ongoing.
How many more years do we have for mitigation for Solomon Pond?
I was almost done.
It's almost done. I want to say it's 1 to 2 years, and it's 2 years for River Bridge. But it's ongoing for Highland Commons, and I believe this year's payment is over 600,000.
And River Bridge is current?
In the 100,000 in stabilization, in that, yes, in the public safety side. And so they have this November and next November that they'll pay, and then that's done.
And so your proposal, Kristen, is to add 41,666 to the expense line item and 41,666 to the public safety stabilization drawdown.
Correct. So you're increasing your revenue, right, to offset that expenditure.
And and this is for the night sergeant, because we already approved. I thought we already approved adding the daytime, the daytime person. It's a 6-month period.
You did, but in order to get to that 5% with the schools, that was one other adjustment that I needed to make. Otherwise, we would have been
I'm a little
different.
lost then. What are you asking for us to do?
So I'm asking for, okay, forget the sergeant for a minute. So it's 33,000, I believe, for the half-time, full-time officer. I'm asking for that to come out of public safety stabilization instead of taxation.
So you're asking for no increase in expenses.
Go back to that line item, Kristen.
Yep. I'm asking for no increase beyond what their budget is, which is the 881,250. So it is reflected as an increase, but it's offset by an increase in public safety stabilization funds revenue.
So do we want to make a motion to approve the wages full-time line item
Well-
47?
Because you previously voted for the 914, 916.
I can't tell what you're doing here.
Right.
I know, it's
Well-
really highlighting it weird. I'm sorry.
So again, we are making no change to the expense line item. So I don't get what we're voting on. Sorry. It was 914, 916. It is still 914, 916.
No, it's 922, 916, because I have the ability to take the entire amount out of public safety and raise that revenue if you're so inclined.
I'm sorry for being thick about this. We have made no changing to staffing, but we're raising the expenses.
No, this would allow you to do the staffing, the 2 staffing increases, both the sergeant and the
Right.
half-time, full-time
So
officer.
you're asking us to add a nighttime sergeant
Correct.
to the thing that we previously said no to, because
Yes.
you'd like to use it out of public safety funds.
Correct.
I'm still opposed to that. So someone else can do the motion, I can be the no person. Just even if we have mitigation, it doesn't mean just because there's a pool of money, again, the mitigation money should ultimately go to buying the new police cars and the new fire trucks and the new ambulances and those type of things. If we spend all of it on salary, it's just not there to do the stuff it was designed to do.
Well,
Sure.
what if we we're planning to put it back into the operating budget next year?
Right. So therefore you're forcing next year's taxpayers to already have a commitment of an increase.
Well, in order for her to make the 5% for the schools, this is what she had to do. So,
Only if we add the sergeant.
yes,
Both, I moved both of them. Yes, I moved both the sergeant. I moved the whole 41,666. Or I added rather 41,666 to public safety revenue to offset the entire 41,666 request. And the only reason, and you know, this is obviously up to you. The only reason I am concerned about not having a supervisor on nighttime is just liability purposes. That's the only reason I think that there's validity to that request.
so I'm going to make the motion to approve line item 47 at the 922,916. It's out there.
I'll second it. We can put it to a vote.
Okay.
I don't think any more information. Jen, Scott Hawkins, no.
Keith, aye.
Stone, no.
Okay. So
Okay,
that's it then.
all right.
Right, I think you're fine using public safety if you'd like to use public safety for the other increases we've already approved.
Okay. I can do that if that works, because I will still need to take that 33
Yep.
or whatever it is, 33 and change out of public safety to make this balance.
Yep.
Okay. And then we hadn't voted on the transfer station. There was a lot of movement going on there, and there was more than a 2.5% increase. So I had some questions on that, and there was an extra Saturday involved and some coverage. They have a formula they work on with the accountant. I had June review it. That is the $1,261 is the needed increase just for covering the COLA as well as those extra days. And then their expenses come in at a little bit lower. They come in at the 2.3.
Okay, so 2.9 and 2.3.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
That actually averages out to almost 2.5.
it's close. But I did go back and ask because I said, why is it more than 2.5? And it's a formula that takes into account extra Saturdays that transfer station days fall on during that calendar year.
It's kind of like an extra students at Assabet, right?
Yeah,
They-
sure.
They are
So-
taking extra $215 out of transfer station receipts.
I am taking it out of transfer station receipts.
Yeah, $215 of it.
So
So-
I'm going to make a motion to approve line item 73 and 74.
Second.
And this has come from the Board of Health. They've already voted on this?
Yes. We haven't voted on this yet because there was so much change
Yep.
going on down
Yep.
there.
I just want to make sure Board of Health had.
Correct.
Okay, Hawkins, aye.
Keefe,
Stone Eye.
All right. Neshoba Health and Nursing, we had originally a 5% increase in there. They've actually come in at a 7.5% increase. So unfortunately, those are fixed costs, so they just need to be revoted by the board. They are smaller amounts since the overall dollar isn't so huge. I can give you what the increase is.
339 and 739.
Right, I was gonna say from 5 to 7.5. I can give you what that increase is if you'd like, but
No,
That's-
about
that's-
$200.
it's a
I'm
couple
gonna
hundred
make-
bucks.
I'm going to make a motion to approve line item 79 and 80.
Second.
I think we're ready to vote then. Hawkins, aye.
Keefe,
Stone Eye.
Okay. And then the last change that I had to make was to keep the social services in ARPA for one more year. I did have a conversation with Victoria about it. We did actually project to use ARPA for social services for FY 24 and 25. So that has reverted back to, oh, sorry, did I go down? Yeah, that has reverted back to the COA portion of the budget being funded out of the budget, and then the social services portion would be funded out of ARPA for FY 24.
So we're all set with that one, or do you need a motion?
I would need a revote because initially you approved taking all of it out of the budget.
Okay, so you want a motion to approve line item 81.
To approve taking COA out of the budget and taking the balance out of ARPA.
Okay, I'm going to just say so moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
Make it easy for yourself.
Sure. Hawkins, aye.
Keefe,
Stone Eye.
Okay. And then the only other in blue mean things are still in flux at this point. Recreation has come in at the request of FinCom with a supplemental funding request for programming, which I understand has been kind of a hot button topic. They want to run some summer camps. They've started with $1,500. I believe right now, I think I have a leftover of about $400 in the budget. So that's going to kind of be in flux. We'll have to see if that's something that we can fund. But I did confirm their increase with them. Obviously, it is a large increase. It's a 21.8%. They do have those numbers from their contractors. Those are all increases. In fact, their landscaping increase came in about $5,000 more, and that is not accounted for in here. I did inform them because it's over 10,000, they have to get 3 quotes. So we'll see what that comes back in as. So still working on that a little bit.
Are they
So
still
the-
paying for poop patrol and the portable toilets?
Yeah, we talked about moving that to public facilities in FY25.
So the 21% increase is
Goose
just
Patrol.
programming?
No, that's
Programming?
just maintenance. That's the Goose Patrol, the lawn care, the
Oh, expenses. Okay.
expenses. Yep. They're asking for another 1,500 to do some programming.
And don't they have an offset receipts account that they can do? Because I remember
They
the
have a
recreation line
revolving
is
account.
relatively new. We
They have a
decided they
revolving.
didn't need to take, they didn't do that. They shouldn't be having to do the maintenance of the fields and some of the other stuff out of their budget. That's why this line item got created in the first place. But I thought they had some money they get fees for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So this was kind of their seed money because they have to pay like the counselors, but they would charge for the camps so that next summer they would actually have that funding in their revolving to be able to pay out.
You might have to remind them they had that money.
They have that money to begin with. Yep.
I was
I
gonna
can-
say,
I
because
can do
there's
that.
there's been a revolving fund.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they've got pretty hefty revolving account, except that I think they can't take more than 10,000 out.
Which we can fix at a town meeting.
Okay.
True.
All right. Let me check into that. So that just came before FinCom last week. So want to check into that a little bit more. And then at the bottom, you've got your Assabet assessment that went to 21.3. Aspect Capital that actually went down 2.9%. You have the BMS assessment at 5% increase. I did put in the original BMS capital request, which was 337,838, just because that's what they requested from Capital. Capital hasn't made any decisions yet. They will be meeting on Wednesday. But now they're up to 440 something. So that request is not reflected here. 5% for Tohoto. And before this evening, I didn't have what the breakout was of Tohoto capital for Berlin. Now I know it's over 600. So I did send that information right off to Capital, so they have it as well. And as we mentioned with health insurance, the IAC will be meeting to discuss that. And that's all I have for you on the budget.
So do we want to take a vote on the schools or not?
I would love to explore with the schools, Kristen, putting the Berlin Memorial Capital, the Tohoto Capital, that's non-debt service, as independent warrant articles that could be voted on the floor and out of the sort of general operating budget.
Okay.
I'd like to explore it. That's not a command. But that could help limit some of the increases that we could absorb in other places.
Well, I mean, it would be nice to do that and maybe have Kristen share with the FinCom, where we're coming from.
Sure. And I am offsetting, just so you know, I am offsetting them with free cash.
Right.
But I'm used to seeing capital as separate articles.
Yeah.
I don't know if because it's a regional school district, that makes a difference. I can look into it.
Well, that's when it changed.
It is when it
Okay.
changed. Yep.
That's what I thought it might be.
Yeah.
But especially if it's going to be wild numbers all over the place from year to year, having an operating budget makes it much harder to do.
Well, and it also, I think, when you take it at least to the floor for a capital vote, you should at least be able to say to the people in the audience, this is exactly what it's for. And I don't know that they get that. They don't know what they're spending the money on. Because it's not in the information sent out, I don't believe.
No, it's not. It's not broken out like capital is, into items.
Mm-hmm. And it's way more than it has ever been once again.
There's a roof issue. I forget if it's at Berlin Memorial or Tohoto that's driving one of those numbers up quite high.
No, it's Boylston Elementary.
Oh, okay. I thought there was a roof on our end.
I thought it was Tohoto. I think Tohonto's flat, which I don't understand why you'd build a building with a flat roof in New England.
Well, I know it. I know that it's Boylston Elementary unless there's two roofs.
Oh, you know what? I just realized I have it right here. Hold on.
Yeah, they said it tonight.
There we go. Berlin Memorial roof. That's a portion of the roof.
And then Boylston Elementary, they were saying something they didn't know if it was just a roof or like a complete assessment on the roof.
Well, that was Boylston Elementary, and she said she didn't know whether it was one or the other,
Yeah.
so she didn't even have it in there yet.
Yeah, we've got to get more information on the capital side.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether we need to take an absolute vote on the numbers, but I would like to make a motion to support Kristen at the FinCom meeting, at least, and just say that I support what she has come up with for the schools.
So that like the 5%, you mean?
Yeah,
And Scott, whether you want to change, I have no objection if you wanted to change the capital numbers to, you know,
I just think it's a creative idea to change out, because if we did that, if we took it out of here and did it purely free, it does drain a lot of free cash. But also means that the budget might be able to support more increase for the schools without a giant tax increase to the people of town.
right. Well, you could play around with it, but I think we need to make a motion so that she goes to FinCom and says, you know, I have the support of the select board for thus and so.
Yeah, the 5 to 7%, or it's that the total that Kristen is set upon is the total we need to get.
Right. So capital hasn't put forth their recommendation. I'd like to kind of see theirs and then I can bring that back to you. But if Assabet's coming in at 21.3, they're voting this week, and I'm stuck really at the 5s on Berlin and Tohono. So if you wanted to vote on those numbers, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with Assabet.
Yeah. It's only a matter of 7 children, I think.
It's a per pupil, right? And it's gone up because of that increase.
And it's amazing to me that, you know, usually in the year when Assabet goes up, Tohoto goes down. So you're just not going to see it this year, I guess.
Yeah.
So as I said, I would just support like 99 through 105. Make a motion to support them.
Peg, how are you feeling?
We're supporting,
For
we're
numbers.
not agreeing to the numbers that are here, correct? We're just agreeing to Kristen pointing out if it's a this increase, it's a that, if it's a this increase, it's a that.
Well, I think 5% operating budget for Berlin Memorial and Tohoto is, it's probably going to be a little unexpected from the schools. It's going to be much lower than they want.
Yeah, because they said in the slide that we were 4 to 5 and Boylston was looking at 5 to 6. So.
Yeah, I tried to throw that in last Monday, but I think there was a lot going on. So I'm not sure if they picked up on the 5%, because that was at the end. So
I heard you.
okay.
I heard you. I don't know if they did, but
Yeah, that's fine. You know what? It's going to be contentious. It's going to be a battle on the floor. Unfortunately, people are going to be pit against each other. This is going to be a huge copy talk. I'm fine at 5%, and we'll see what happens.
I mean, I've already pulled things out of the budget that I would have rather left in wherever
I
I
know.
could. So
and actually, you know, like I said, with the Tohoto numbers, if say Boylston says, well, we can only do 5%, then we'll do, that would be their 2/3 and we would do 1/3 of the total.
Mhm.
So it may actually go down below 5%. I just can't see Boylston picking up more than 5 or 6%.
It is how we've survived, Chris, a lot, is that Boylston is a much tougher fiscal shape than we are as a town. And so
Yeah. I don't know what
let
happened
them,
That FedEx plant that was going in that they talked about for years.
It is there.
It's
I
there.
know.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to accept the 5% increase for the schools.
I think,
And basically the numbers 99 through 105.
I might not go for the capital yet because that's
Okay.
not firm, so.
All right.
So-
So
5% would be good if you could vote on that.
the 2 5%, or do
Yeah.
you want to Assabet too?
If you want to throw an Assabet, that would be great.
All right, then I'll do 99, 101, and 103.
I'll second it.
I think I'm gonna be fine, because I think we're gonna revote, and whatever we agree tonight, we'll probably revote, but it gives people the direction we want to go in. And so I think we're ready to vote. Hawkins, aye.
E5.
Stone Eye, and Eloise has her hand up. I don't know how long it's been up. Sorry, Eloise.
Yeah, sorry, I've been looking at numbers.
I just wanted to tell you, I am on the capital planning, and they did ask for the roof repair over the cafeteria.
Berlin Memorial.
Correct.
Okay. Must be raining on their lunch.
I didn't ask that question.
All right.
And then you think 109, we're gonna hold off until next week as well, to get a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, historically, I understand the IAC has voted to take the increase as opposed to do plan redesign.
Right.
That's been their recommendation. I imagine that may be the same, but I'd like to get their input.
Is there another IAC meeting this week, Kristen?
It's the 9th. It's Thursday.
And is that just for this issue, or was that to talk about retiree health insurance too, or not?
It was a mix of both, but
Okay.
mostly to talk about the 10.5%. I think we might talk a little bit about the OPEB.
Okay,
Yeah.
Can you send me that link when you have a chance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
And then on line 109, just to make sure when you do the 10.5, it's 10.5 over the sort of the actual with a little bit of buffer. You might not have used all 665,000. And so you might not need a full 10.5 to still be able to fund 32B.
Right. It always includes, Dennis explained this to me.
Yeah.
He always factors in 2 additional singles and 1 additional family, I believe it was. I'll have to look.
He did, and I think we did that when the schools were part of it. The idea that we potentially, I mean, you have a sense of how many people currently don't take health insurance who could,
Yep.
you know, and is that really a realistic part? Because I think there might be some, it won't be giant savings, but some there to look at.
Yep.
Okay. Goodness. We also then have the annual town meeting warrant to look at.
Yes. So this is a first draft. I fully expect there are some small typos and things of that nature in there. In fact, I found a couple big ones. Let me just pull up the warrant. So I don't know how you usually go through the warrant, but right now I didn't number the articles in case they needed to be moved
Yep.
around.
well, this is obviously your Leicester version.
Yeah, I fixed that.
No, I'm just saying, even some of the other things, they don't look familiar.
Okay.
That's why I wondered.
Yep.
We generally in the past have not done a select board recommendation.
Okay.
And
We're fully entitled to.
I know. Sometimes it's like, sometimes you don't know whether you should or not. And I think that's been debated before with other selectmen, not me, but. And the other thing was, who is sponsoring each article? Like the zoning articles are usually the planning board, and that kind of thing.
So unless your bylaw is different, typically the select board puts everything on the warrant. So I don't,
Right.
but you like to say where it comes from, is that?
Well,
Yeah,
that's who
well,
gets up and stands up and they stand up and read their own articles.
Okay, I can put that in.
So, and then the FinCom does the budget, of course.
Yep.
Right.
And I
And
don't
then
know.
we draw straws on who does the ones that don't really have a sponsor.
Yep.
Okay.
Or if they're our,
We arm wrestle for who gets to say motion to adjourn at the end.
or
That
who-
would be you, Scott. The one who's up
Initiative.
for election gets to do it.
Oh, is that? No.
Yeah,
Motion to adjourn.
yep.
Oh,
It's popular.
or
if I-
move to the polls.
If I could go back to the selectmen recommendation, you know, typically we actually went through this in Leicester, 6 years ago, we had a new town administrator come in and Leicester wasn't taking votes either. The select board wasn't taking votes on the warrant articles. They were just taking votes to place items on the warrant. And, you're fully within your right to make a recommendation to the people if it's something that you would like to do. We did switch over to it in Leicester. I think it provided a little bit of clarity. And maybe it's not the same here, but I know in Leicester, sometimes the select board and FinCom did not always agree. So it was good to hear from different voices in the community as to how people felt. I'm happy to take it out. I just thought
Or
we'd
it could be political suicide.
Well,
That's
we could
what I
also
think
just,
some people were thinking, like
Oh, okay.
Thomas and Val Bradley, I think they took a vote on it and decided, no, thank you. But I just wanted to point that out. I mean, it's not that, whatever the board decides, it's fine.
Okay.
Peg, do you have a preference of whether or not we put a select board recommendation or not on?
No. No,
I don't
I'm fine. I'm fine either way. It's
Also
not,
means, that also means
it's
we
not
have-
high on my list of we need to do.
Yep.
that also means we have to take a vote on every single article about whether we support it or not.
Well, or after we put together the warrant and realize that we actually support everything on it, but
Yeah.
it would require, like some of which, especially when you get to the planning board ones, I would have to do more research because I have no problem putting them on and believing the planning board has done some research, but their votes aren't on some of these yet to fully know, and I'd
Right.
hate to overwrite any of those.
Right.
And so maybe we're just not as smart. We're gonna do it at least for this year. We'll think about it more for next year for select board votes.
That works.
The pilot agreements felt new to me.
That's the highway solar. Yep. And then there's being able to give the select board, there's a change in the law that Molly had brought to my attention. It needs to be revoted. So there's two things. There's one to accept the new MGL, and there's also a second to have the solar put on highway specific, or to authorize a solar pilot agreement specifically at the highway garage.
And then are we gonna be ready to do River Bridge?
One way or the other, yes. At a minimum, we're ready to do parcel 6B.
Okay.
Right.
We may not be ready for a for a development agreement modification. I'm hoping we are.
Yep.
But it's, I believe, time to acquire that parcel.
So I'm slowly going through there's not a page number on my screen. That's not gonna make this easy.
Oh.
Just looking at if there's ones that I quickly have any question on, knowing that you're adding some wording and stuff.
And this obviously hasn't been run through legal counsel yet.
Right.
I want to work on it a little bit more.
So while Scott is strolling, there were a couple that I had. And can I find them? Ah, yes, article unknown, acceptance of private way as a public road, Gibbs Road and Pollard Road. What is the impact to the town to take on additional roads that now fall under highway to pave and plow and salt and fix when there's a giant hole? What is the impact to that?
I mean, I don't have a quantified impact, but there is an impact. That all falls on the town now, if you accept that as a public way. So this came from a planning board.
And if we don't, then what are the ramifications if we say, no, you built them, you take care of them?
Then they have to continue to maintain them.
And buses can't go down the road and so on and so forth.
Oh,
There's less enforcement that can be done down on a private way too. as we've run into recently. Oh, where did it go? Where did it go?
I was gonna say, I know that one, Peg, because I had some of those same questions and I cannot find it.
What are you looking for?
The private ways.
Yeah.
It was up, there's one, and then there was one a couple after that.
Okay. Mary was looking
Yeah,
for
I'm
it.
sorry. I had page numbers and somehow I got them deleted at the end. So it's the fourth to
Yeah.
last page.
Yeah, it's around 20, Scott, if you scroll.
Okay, yep. Oh, maybe I just gave up too soon.
But what do we,
No.
Well, I would like to see what the
Yeah.
impact is to the town,
Yeah.
because again, if it's now all of a sudden Fred has more stuff to do and Fred now needs more people, then, you know, hello, gonna be more people, more equipment that he's gonna need. So I would like that expanded upon a little bit
Yep.
as to impact to the town.
well, I think if you have more roads, though, you might actually get, is it more chapter 90
Don't know.
Right.
to help pay?
So
do the
it's a
roads?
planning board motion, but yeah, we should make sure they're ready for those type of questions. Because Peg, if you and I both have those questions, just quickly reading it, there'll be 40 other people in town will have those questions as well.
So I'll send an email to Jay and I'll just CC Fred because he may have some of this information off the top of his head.
There was, Kristen, in one version I found it and now I can't find it.
The
Oh,
soils,
I know where it is. No, it's in the annual report. Never mind. Those are questions to come. Okay.
yeah, the one thing I wasn't able to include, unfortunately, is getting those soils bylaws amended. There's just not enough time. We'll have to look to that for fall town meeting.
Can I just ask my elephant in the room question? What is wrong with what KP Law drafted up? And because now Earthworks was such in a giddy up hurry to pull this last May and then it's just died.
It's a good question. I met with them, a little while back.
I don't think Earthworks liked that version.
They don't like the limits. They think that the sense I got was that more should be exempt. And that because they say no person, firm, or corporation shall remove or import in excess of 100 cubic yards. They said to me that should be more like 1,500 or 2,000. And to make it clearer which things are exempt. So one of the things we've had questions come up on are like roads, grading. It refers to topographical changes, but it doesn't really give a definition of what that means. So there's been a couple of things like that have come up. Nothing, I think, like immediately earth-shattering.
So there is one on here that I want to talk about. Kind of sort of on page 18, if you scroll, transfer funds to other post-employee benefit account. So last May, at the town meeting, we voted to allow the IAC to go off and come back with options, how this was going to be funded, whether it was change in insurance, selling a building, and I can't remember everything else. So maybe I've missed it. I'm going to say I know I haven't. Where is that information? And I know that Scott, you had rather vocal concerns about funding this. So how did we get from, hey, you can go off and find information for us to, hey, here's some money? This is missing for me. So where is this information?
So they have drafted a policy and talked about potential changes. That's a little bit later on the agenda.
But that's only one thing, Kristen. They're only looking at one thing. When they talked to us last year, and I know that you weren't here, when they talked to us last year, they had 4 or 5 things that they were going to come back at, and now all of a sudden it's just one. So I have huge concerns, on this, and especially the funding. Are you going to get caught in it? where 1 year we can pay because we have free cash. Next year, we don't have free cash, so we can't pay, which means 2 years from now, we now pay double. So there's all those questions that are still unanswered. So I am not comfortable with putting this on a warrant until all that information is there and is presented.
Okay. I believe their goal was to present that information over the next month and a half so that that could be ready for town meeting.
Yeah, I will be joining Peg. I don't think that article is ready for town meeting. If we have a fall town meeting and we have that stuff in place, it can go on there, but
Yeah.
we don't have the actual materials on how much do we need to be putting in there to fully fund it. We have no sense of how many people might be qualifying.
Right.
And I gave very specific examples of where I fear it's gonna bankrupt us. We gave examples and would love a policy that would write it in, and we'll get to it when we get to that artist, that their policy gets to maybe a couple things, but not the biggest examples I gave.
So there is an actuarial firm that can run the numbers, but there needed to be a policy in place that
Yep.
understood what, in order to run the numbers. So that was
Yep.
the first step in the process.
And I know that we'll get to that as that comes up because
Yeah.
I have a ton of questions, but it's like, a question begets a question begets a question, and it just turns into a number on a page with no quantitative data behind it. So unless you can convince me and show me, I'm a hard no on that.
I was just going to ask if that's a pretty lengthy thing to have to talk about tonight. Is there any chance we could put it off for at least another week? That's a long discussion, I guess.
Uh,
I hate
How about
to say
Chris-
that because I know Richard's in the audience.
Right, so maybe we do is we try to at least hear a quick presentation, lay out some questions, try not to have a debate or go to a vote tonight, so that Richard can at least hear where we're thinking, and have some ability to go back to the IAC with something that could be actionable.
I think
'Cause
that'd
you're
be
right,
helpful.
we are getting near 9.
We need to be more organized or something.
I think there's a lot too this time of year, which makes it challenging.
It didn't look like a very long agenda. It's all on one page.
I know, but you say budgets and OPEB, and those could be 2 hours all by themselves, actually, they might
I
be.
know.
So I think we've given you the feedback on some of the warrant. I don't know if there's anything more is needed at this point.
Okay.
And so let's get on to our retiree help. And you're right, Chris, we'll try to be mindful. I don't think we're gonna try to get to a formal agreement tonight, but let's do a review of it, get some of our questions out there so that the IAC people who are here can have something to go back to the committee to talk about.
All right, Mary, could you bring Rich forward, please? And I'm going to share the draft policy.
So who drafted the policy, Kristen?
The IAC.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks.
Let
You
me work
still-
on.
You still awake?
I'm still awake. Oh my gosh, you guys at the budget, I feel I feel for you, man. That's challenging.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's a couple of things that I just want to briefly go over with you tonight, and I respect all the concerns. Believe me, I certainly do, and I think this is a little bit of fact gathering for myself and the team as to where are we at and what are you all as you see that Kristen has up on the screen that we drafted, I think is a very well put together policy. What we tried to do is we think we took 12 or 15 different communities. We looked at different eligibility requirements that they each had, and we kind of tried to pick out the ones that we thought would protect the town's interest the best. Meaning that when you keep going back to Scott's concern that someone just gets in and grabs the health care. So if you, I'm not sure if you all had any chance to take a look at it as to what the language is in it.
And then Richard, your mic does cut in and out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that any better if I get a little closer to it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay, Yeah, so as I was saying is that we have this policy put together to draft, and hopefully you all had a chance to take a look at it. And we had taken a good 12 or 15 different communities, and we looked at we tried to pick out the best ones that we thought would protect the town's interest the best as to preventing someone from just getting hired and bailing on us and collecting retiree health care. So there are requirements that you have to be you have to be collecting a pension through Worcester County Retirement, which they have their own requirements as to years of service before you're even eligible to retire out of Worcester County. So there's again, if you take a look at it, if there's any specific language that you like or don't like, then we'd really love to hear about it. Or if they think there's something else that might need to be in there, again, we'd love to hear on that as well.
So
Richard, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, is it, when you looked at policies from other towns, were there things included like must work, be an employee of the town for 20 years, or must be?
The only one that we saw that had a Tennessee requirement was the town of Westminster, and they had in there that you had to work for them for 10 years. That's the only one that we found that actually had a vesting requirement within the town itself. I know someone that works for Westminster, and how accurate this is, I can't, but the person told me that their HR director said that if that ever got challenged, it probably would lose in court. So that's something we could look into if you want us to look into a vesting.
That's one of the things that I wondered, whether that would be a legal battle, one way or the other, or how many towns actually have that in there. I know when we looked at the schools, when we were giving retiree insurance to Tohoto, I think we may have put a year in there, but it might be like, I don't know, 10 years. I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, we sort of do have the year requirement in there because we have that you have to be on the town's health plan for a minimum of 1 year in order to be able to retire and collect off of it. And again, and that goes hand in hand where you have to be eligible
right
on itself, which has age limits as well.
Okay.
And also with the Pension Reform Act of 2012, the qualifying age to retire through Worcester County has increased. So it used to be like group ones, which is the typical employee. They could have gone out at 55. I think now you got to go to 60 at a minimum. So they did change the requirement for people coming in after 2012.
And was that in there also?
Well, it says you have to be eligible. You have to be able to qualify to retire out of Worcester County Regional. So
okay,
someone that was hired prior to 2012, they're still on the old system. But, looking around the typical employee that we have going now, it's probably a 50-50 split as the ones that were prior to 2012 and the ones that that predated that, postdated it.
So those are the kind of things I thought maybe Scott and Peg might be interested to know if they were included or not, because that would somewhat limit, numbers of people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. And that's what we're looking at. Again, my big fear, and I join your sentiment, Scott and Peg, is that we don't want someone just getting hired and bailing on us and then reaping that benefit, but yet you didn't get any years out of them. So between the requirement of having to be able to qualify to be able to retire out of to begin with is one step, and the other step is that we put that language in there that you had to be on the policy for at least the preceding year prior to retirement. So that would prevent the case that happened in, I think it was the town of Irving, where they hired she might have been a superintendent of school, but she worked like one said, yeah, I'm done, and she got on retirement health care, and she was on it. And I personally know a person that's actively looking for a town that doesn't have a policy just so we can get on and collect their retirement health care if you can find a town that should hire them. So that's one of the things that we were looking at, is we don't want that to happen. We want long-term employees that are going to stay. And that's the whole goal, is to bring equity and fairness to the town of Berlin with its employees and especially with the comparable communities. So that if we do recruit an excellent person, that they're not bailing on us in a couple of years because they find that the benefit package is better elsewhere.
Richard, my question to you, one of the other pieces of documentation along with your draft was, the subject was elected officials group insurance benefit.
Yes.
My questions are here, so thank you, Kristen. How does this letter that you have tie into the draft?
So this letter here is actually looking for the select board to make a decision for us to move forward, because under the policy that we drafted, a elected official would not be eligible for retiree health care. But if you go down to, as Kristen scrolled down, we have several options that we would like to have some determination from or guidance from the board as to where do you see elected officials moving forward as to, so option A is, do we do nothing and allow an elected official that receives a compensation to still be on healthcare? Option B is an elected official can be on healthcare but pay a different rate. They pay 50% of the premium, the town pays the other 50%. And that saves the town about $31,500 a year if you change the contribution of what an elected person pays towards the health care. And then option C is that we phase out the elected officials from receiving healthcare benefits altogether. And just to put it into a number, right now, the elected officials, the total value is $100,000 a year is what the town pays towards elected officials. So the IAC is not a decision-making board, we're advisory, and moving forward with an actuary as to, tying this into a policy as to where does the board see the future of elected officials and the costs that the town is expending on them. Some arguments are that we've heard is that, well, if you want to attract people to run for elected offices, you may have to provide a benefit. We do have some elected officials, such as planning board, they don't receive compensation, so they do it as community service, basically. So again, the IAC, we're not policy driven, we're only advisory. So we're looking back to the select board for advice as to what do you see us in the future. And this would affect the actuary number as to what the retiree healthcare, the OPEB cost would be, because you could be pulling that money and applying to OPEB, or you can say that, well, we think that the benefit to the elected officials receiving healthcare is a good thing. Or again, option B is that you change the spread of what they pay. So that's where we're at with this letter, Peg.
So, Richard, what did you say the numbers were? Because to me, these are just numbers on paper without anything. So if the employee is paying 25 and the town is paying 75 and it goes down to 50-50, what is the cost, the exact cost savings to the town? Well, is exact as you can get it. Okay,
I can get it pretty down exact.
Okay.
So if you reduce it to 50-50 contribution, that the town pays half, the elected official pays half.
Yep.
The town would save $31,551.48. So I guess that's fairly exact.
That's fairly exact, Richard. All right. So go ahead.
And if you totally eliminate it, it was just shy of $100,000 is what the town pays towards elected officials' healthcare.
So obviously, C is really drastic, B is kind of sort of drastic. Have you talked to anybody? Have you gotten any input on, hey, this is a great idea, or, oh, hell no, you can't do this because, I can't afford, outside insurance? What is the feedback on this?
Okay,
'Cause
so
you're making
so-
changes. Mhm.
Directly, we do not know who the elected officials are that are taking the benefit. That's here nor there. But I have been approached by a couple of people that told me that they are on a plan. And interestingly, they actually qualify for Medicare.
Right.
So my response back to one of them was, then why would you not be on Medicare and get off the town's plan, which is costing town, X amount of dollars? And the response was that it's a better plan and they might have to change a doctor. And another person said to me, I never thought of it. That it's just a benefit that we get and we signed up for it, and we never really gave any thought that, yeah, you're right, I probably could get on Medicare.
And Rich,
All Good.
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I've been asking questions. Your turn.
Oh, I was just going to say, to follow up, Rich, on that whole, the town's plan is better. I think part of that is because when towns offer retiree health insurance, they usually pay 50% of that supplement D plan for Medicare, which is a piece of this that is missing. So I think, and that's a pretty low cost. I want to say a lot of communities split that Medicare Part D 50-50 with their retirees because they're not actually paying for the Medicare portion of it. So it's like $250 or $300 a month split 50-50. It's a relatively low cost once employees get on Medicare, and it does encourage them, to move in that direction as well, because you're providing better coverage all around.
Right, that's gonna be my comment. That I don't know where it's under eligibility or where it is in the policy, but adding that at Medicare, that if we do retiree health benefits, that when you're eligible Medicare, you must sign up for Medicare, and we will pay for, as Christian said, let's say 50% of Part D, because that's still going to be significantly cheaper than buying health coverage. And so I would end you can stay on this town plan at the age of 67, which it is right now, correct? For Medicare, whatever it is for Medicare.
I think it's 67.
Yeah. Because that'll also lower the stuff. And I think you got to some of my other stuff, Richard, at least when it comes to someone who starts working at 19, retires at 40, and we're paying their health insurance for the rest of their lives, that the retirement age is now in the 50s or so.
Yeah, so to that one, Scott, so an individual that started after 2012, if they group ones, they got to go to 60. So,
Right.
so that rules that person out. But now, getting back to the Medicare, under enrollment, item 2 on our policy says individuals, their spouses and or dependents must enroll in Medicare A and B as soon as they are eligible.
Oh, yep.
You see that?
Yeah, I now see it. Yep.
Yeah. Failure to enroll will jeopardize participation in contribution to health and dental.
So potential passing of the proposal that's on the screen tonight, what are we agreeing to?
So what's on the screen right now is again kind of a decision from your board as to where do you see us going as far as elected officials. Do you want to leave it as is, that they still are on the health plan at 75-25? Do you want a savings and change their contribution to 50-50? Or do you think it's something that should be phased out in the long run, that, if someone's on now, when their term expires, that they would no longer have the ability to be on the town's plan? So it comes down to several things. One is being the cost savings. And again, if you do the 50-50 split, you're saving $31,000. If you do the 100%, no more elected officials can be part of the health plan. then you're saving close to $100,000 annually.
And again, even if we do option C, elected officials who job is more than 20 hours a week are still counted as employees. They're not impacted by this.
That is
Decision.
that is correct, and that's in the policy.
Yep.
If you want the retirement based on even being elected, but you're paying in because you regularly work over 20 hours a week, then you
Right.
could retire out and be on the plan.
I just have a concern, Berlin's not a big community for elected officials. And personally, I don't take the town insurance, for this, but because I don't take it doesn't mean I'm not comfortable right now with saying because I don't take it, Scott, I'm making this up, or maybe I'm not, you're taking it. So my decision is going to impact you, but I have not had a chance to talk to you to get your feelings on this. It's almost like the input is incomplete, for yes, this is a really good thing. And you know what? Hey, thanks for the heads up. And maybe I need to start thinking about or changing blah, 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 or absolutely not, I can't, or hey, you know what? Either way, I'm fine. So yeah, I thank you for the numbers. The numbers were awesome, Mr. Exact. But I just think that we're missing, personally, I think that we're missing input on this, and I'm not comfortable voting either way.
Right. So
I don't know how you could do it, like a doodle pool. Google, Mary knows how to do it. Mary probably knows what I'm thinking, and she's yelling at the
Google.
screen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joe says what type of answers would get you there? I assume people are on health insurance because they need it or want it. They're not just doing it to drain town coffers. I can't imagine anybody is doing it just for that. I think they're doing it because it's better than Medicare or Medicaid. Some people, it might be they just didn't think about it. Some people might not have other options.
Well, and that's kind of sort of what I'd like to know. Maybe, maybe there's more people like the couple that Richard ran into that went, I didn't know. That's great. Thank you for telling me. Then that might take care of the issue. But I just think right now we're operating in a little bit of a vacuum without input. Because Kristen, how many employees are there in town? 30-ish?
We have less than 100.
Okay.
That's our cutoff with health insurance. So
I
I didn't
think
get an exact number.
I think last year, if I recall correctly, I think maybe 28 employees taking healthcare.
Oh, taking healthcare. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Was that more your question, Peg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
that's
think there was 28, and I think right now there's 6 that are elected. I think that was out of the 28.
Right.
so you're talking a very small amount.
Well, you're
it's-
talking maybe a fifth of all health insurance costs of the town.
Right.
Correct. Yeah,
That just went up 10%.
that's correct. Yes.
And it is allowed under statute, as you mentioned, or as is mentioned in that policy. I will say it is a bit unusual to allow elected officials working less than 20-hour a week to be on health insurance. In my experience, from all the communities that I've worked in and have spoken with, that's been phased out in a lot of communities. Doesn't mean we have to do it here. But it is a portion of the cost, so that is something to consider.
I mean, I'm generally liking, and I don't want to too much to it, but I'm generally liking CEO. I'd like to look at a better sort of grandfathering in, because I worry that, like, if we make this decision some March, and if a person who's on health insurance happens to be up in election in May, that gives them maybe 2 months to figure something out. And I'd like to figure out a way to, make it effective, the first time someone's up for election after, pick a year or two out. And then thinking that we have the policy that says, again, that people need to retire, need to go to Medicare if they're of an age that is allowable. And where I almost like us to go is somehow, and I don't think, because again, it's getting later in the night and this is a nuanced thing, but I'd love to be able to get I would approve a draft policy to send to an actuary to get numbers on, as opposed to, I don't want to approve a policy that suddenly now is the rule of the town. Because I'd like to make sure we can afford whatever policy we look at, and I think you've narrowed down from, millions to something that might be affordable, but I'd like to know that before I say, yes, this is a policy we're definitely going to implement.
Is there a cost to have an actuary run the numbers for us? I know that's probably a rhetorical question and the answer is yes, but
It is in the treasurer's budget.
okay. How long does it typically take to get numbers back-ish?
That's a good
6
question. but
months? 6 months, 9
Oh,
months?
no.
30 days?
I would think within 30 days at the most.
Okay, all right.
So I'm going to agree with you 100%. I think the actuary is the way to go at this point, because we've been working off a 2-year-old actuary, and we've had some people leave, we've had some new people come in, so the dynamics is not the same. And the actuary could plug these different scenarios into your equation, because that's how the first one was done. They said if you did it at a 75-25, or if you did it on a 50-50, if you allowed retirees elected to retire, it changed the value. So I think the crucial thing, and I'm agreeing with you 100%, it's Peg, is that you need the number. You absolutely need the number, because that affects everything.
No.
So again, we've had some people we've had some new people come in. The new people are younger, so that's going to change it, because their duration is going to be further out. So I think the crucial thing is let's get the latest, greatest.
Mhm.
I think what I would like to hear, though, is if whether it's tonight or next week, if you could take a look at the policy, and because that's a guiding thing to the actuary as well, because they're going to look at that policy and they're going to pick pieces out of it, and they're going to say, okay, well, you got to do X, Y, and Z to even qualify. So they plug that into the formula.
Right. And the policy doesn't say 75-25 or 50-50 or 60-40 or 90-10. I don't see where in the policy it says what percent we're expecting the retiree to pay.
You're absolutely correct, and that is by design, mostly because the lowest it can be is 50-50. And again, that's going to come down to a numbers game, is that the actuary can run it at 50-50 and tell you what's going to cost you. You can run it at 75-25 or 70-30 or any mix, but the lowest is 50-50. So I'm not sure if we have that verbiage in there, but
so if I could suggest, since they ran several different scenarios before,
yes,
if they could run a 50-50 and a
Yes.
75-25,
yes,
and the 3 different flavors of elected officials, again, so that's 6 different scenarios.
Mhm.
That gets some of the numbers that allow us to understand the impacts of A, B, and C, and 50-50 versus 75-25.
yes, agreed.
And Chris and Peg, does that sound like an appropriate way to go?
Yeah, it does.
It does.
Richard, just to confirm, there's nothing in here that says, I'm making it up, policy goes into play April 1st. April 2nd, that's a better day, not April Fool's Day, April 2nd. I retire March 31st. It's a Friday, policy takes effect on Monday. There's no way that I'm done, retired, can sneak back in to take advantage of the policy. Like once I'm done, if there's no retirement policy in play, I'm done. I don't get to come back and go, pick me, I want to take it now.
That is correct. As of this draft, there is no look back policy in this. This is a moving forward from its inception date. It's not a look back.
Okay.
Is that held
Because we
on
have to
Richard.
debate it at some point, we'll have a debate that's a publicly known debate, probably several months out. And someone might decide to work 3 more days and announce their retirement for April 2nd. But yes, I get where you're going, Peg. There is no
Okay.
look back, which is a good thing.
So when we did Tohonto's, we actually did it through the GIC, and we had to do a look back. I forget if they were alive. I think we had to find them and notify them that we were doing this.
Yeah, so the GIC is its own entity. It's its own,
Right.
for lack of a better word, is, you know, the government, the Massachusetts set it up and said, everybody wants to jump on GIC, you have to play by our rules. I think in our case is that we the town wants to move forward with things, so I think we have more latitude than the GIC would have had.
Well, it's changed probably since then. That was probably 15 years ago or more. But still, it was very strict.
Yeah.
So Richard, do you need us to go back and say, hey, I have a question on paragraph 3, blah, 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 to give to the actuary? Or Kristen, is this a question for you to let the actuary run with the proposals that Scott put together?
I think personally, if the board is going to support an actuary, I think that's cool and awesome. And if in the meantime, while we're trying to line that up, if you go through the policy and you see something that you question, don't like, or you think should be made a little firmer, or add something else added in prior to the actuary, just let us know, and we'll pick it up at one of our meetings and hash it out.
If you want to send that to me, I can get it out to the IAC.
All right, so what's the deadline? A week from tonight? Any
I'm
feedback?
meeting on Thursday.
All right,
I mean, if you want to have it for this meeting,
all right, so we'll shoot for Thursday?
if you could, that would be great.
I mean, it's not a long document. It's a 3-page document, so,
Right.
okay.
June has her hand up.
Nope.
All right. Good.
Hi, June.
Looks like you're muted, June.
Both Junes are muted.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, too. Hello.
Yes, too.
Am I here?
Yes.
Okay, and just also keep in mind, Peg, where it's not so much to vote it in right away, because it still has to go through Jill to make sure that we're doing everything we have to legally, and also legal counsel. So it's not something that we're actually asking to implement, like starting, I don't know, in 2 months.
Thursday.
This is just, yeah, I mean, it's definitely not we're gonna like hold you to it right now. It's just so we
Okay.
can go forward and keep moving it in a positive direction with the board's consent. That's pretty much what we're doing.
Yeah, and that was gonna be one of my final questions is, what are we looking at for a timeline? Are we gonna chug, boom, get it done this year, or are we looking towards next year? So that will, guide us to giddy up and get stuff back to Kristen, or to allow Richard to gather some more information. So, thank you, Ms. June, I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
And we also have to keep in mind that unfortunately, it's not the only thing that's on Kristen's table or any of ours table. So it's one of those where it may take a little bit of time, but
Okay.
every little bit helps.
You gotcha.
Thank you
Alright.
all for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. June.
Thanks, June.
Okay.
Good. So I think we're giving Richard some ideas, and we get any more questions or comments to him by Thursday.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Mr. Hanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks-
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for, yep.
Yep. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The next new business item I have is the amendments to the Select Board 2022 Annual Town Report Submission.
Okay, so there were 2 changes that were made to the report statutorily, or according to the bylaws, we're supposed to report on any litigation throughout the year. And we also typically include the number of licenses that have gone through the office. So those 2 sections were added in.
There were can't find it. There were two questions that I had, Kristen, on the, if you can pull it up, it's kind of towards the bottom on the annual report where you go through ARPA funds.
Hold on a second. Annual report. Am I sharing? Nope, hold on.
Keep going. Keep a little bit more. Till you get to the numbers. Keep going. I think it up. All right, maybe back up a little bit. There's a whole paragraph on where we spent ARPA
Okay.
funds.
Oh, here you go. Yep.
Yeah. So my two questions on the added weatherization for the new highway barn. Wasn't there a meeting a couple weeks ago where you and Fred, or you or Fred, had talked to the people who were supposed to put this in, but it never got put in, and either it's we're getting the materials free, or we're getting the labor free, or maybe wish we're getting both free? So is that 25,000 truly representative of that cost?
So that's just what's been allocated under ARPA, not what's been expended. It's authorized, so maybe that needs to be reworded then, as opposed to just spent total. It should be just total authorized,
Okay.
because I believe they've agreed to install it. We just have to pay for the materials, and I can confirm that with Fred.
Okay. So theoretically, that number could drop.
It should.
It should. And then on the inflationary increase for the ambulance, the 113K.
Yep,
So we had decided, I don't know how many meetings ago, Chief Clark was still here, so December meetings, that ARPA was gonna, for lack of a better word, front the money so that he could lock that cost in, correct?
Yep.
Because if we waited, then who knows how much it would be. But then that money, that 113, would come back to the town. Obviously, you can't put it back in ARPA, but would come back to the town out of ambulance receipts. So we're basically kind of here, you can have the money, but it's not due yet. But that line item kind of goes away because we're gonna really take the money out of ambulance funds. True?
That's
Did I
correct.
make it up?
Nope,
Okay.
you are correct.
So is there some type of asterisk explanation that you could put in there to almost say we're I'm not very good with words right now, but we're going to give you $113,000, but we're going to get this back. No, it's not going to be ARPA funds. It'll probably go, what I'm going to assume, back to general funds, but basically ARPA is not losing out on that money. Do you kind
Yes,
of get what I'm saying?
I do. And I had a wording down it somewhere, so I will find it and I will put
Okay.
it in there.
Right,
Right.
because this is right, if the town warrant article passes to take this money from somewhere else, we'll rescind this approval for 113,500 of ARPA funds.
Right. Okay.
Or it could be just deleted.
I don't know, I wouldn't be ultimately, well, we did vote to spend the 113,
Right.
and the 113 won't necessarily come from, I mean, it has to pass town meeting. We don't have the authority to take it out of the other stuff. So
Right.
if a warrant article passes at town meeting in the May, this line item will be rescinded.
Right.
Correct. And I do have that in the warrant.
Right.
Okay. All right. Those were the only two questions that I had on funding on the annual report.
Mary, just highlight that, and I have that language written down somewhere. I'll fix it up tomorrow.
It's almost kind of like what conservation did last year.
Mhm.
You allow us to borrow $600,000,
Mhm.
but if this goes through, we're going to give it back, type of thing. So you just want people to be like, hey, don't worry about this. We already have this covered, but had to lock it in so we didn't have sticker shock 6 months from now.
Mhm.
Okay.
So do you want a motion to approve it again?
Yes, please.
Okay, I would make a motion to approve again the select board 2022 annual town report.
I'll second it.
I think we're ready to vote then. Hawkins, aye.
Keefe, aye.
Stone Eye.
Select board comments, questions, updates. Chris?
I went to the Council on Aging meeting on February 28th. Carol Costello was a guest at the meeting, and discussed, she wanted to reintroduce herself, I guess, as the interim superintendent. And they talked a little bit about the budget. She also said that she would be at 19 Carter on March 24th at 11 a.m. and I believe again on April 1st, which is a Saturday. Let's see. I just wrote down March 7th was the school committee meeting. Bob asked about how the school committee intends to move forward with the budget. The schools have met with the Boylston Selectmen, Megan Kilcoyne, Robin Kennedy about circuit breaker in Chapter 70. It was suggested that a pen pal program be instituted with students and seniors. The Council on Aging is low on drivers for the van, in case anybody's interested. And the warranty runs out in June. The formula grant of $14,472 was received. They talked about the needs versus wants due to the possibility of our budget cuts. Council on Aging created a publication committee with 4 members to look at the options to cut back on Powder House News costs. The Council on Aging is sponsoring several events coming up. Check the town website for details and encourage people to participate in the survey from Council on Aging that should be arriving, I think, in the mail very soon. The next meeting is March 28th, the last Tuesday of the month at 4 p.m. And I was just going to ask if, Kristen, if tomorrow you could send us an update on tonight's FinCom meeting in Boylston.
Sure. I think we just went through half of the PowerPoint before I left, so we didn't get through too much. And there were a few questions that were asked. I did forward the updated PowerPoint to you all. And you can let me know if you have any questions you want, to convey back to the schools, and I'd be happy to do that.
Well, I mean, even in, what they discussed.
Yeah, they didn't give numbers when I was there. I don't know if they did afterwards, but I'll see if I can find out any information.
Yeah, because I was there until about 7.
Yeah.
But
We all had a 7 o'clock select board meeting to get to.
right. So I was just wondering if June was there, maybe she could give you an update, and you could send us whatever information you found out.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay, sorry, it's getting late. Brain went fuzzy on that one.
Oh,
Gotcha.
The brain. That's all I got.
Peg?
To follow with Chris on your point, I was chatting with Victoria about ADA items, which I'll get to in a hot second, but she said right now there's only been about 200 responses on that survey. So
I
it's out.
haven't gotten it in the mail or anything. How are we supposed to?
I got mine.
Yeah, the big orange card or yellow card?
No.
No, it actually, well, you got the card. So if you wanted, you could scan it, the QR code, and you can do it online. Or I got a 4 or 5 page survey in the mail that I filled out and sent it back.
Oh,
So
I didn't get one.
You didn't get one either?
I did it from the yellow card. So every member of
yellow card?
my household all got a yellow card that had a link on it, a QR code that you could scan, and we went online and did it.
But where'd you get the yellow card?
In the mail.
Oh, like I didn't get it.
That basically said, hey, heads up, survey's coming. If you're old and you need it written, it's on its way, or here, snap this link, boop, and out you go. So,
well, I wonder, what do I do?
There's a link. I saw the link somewhere on the town of Berlin.
Yeah,
Oh,
Berlin,
I don't know if Mary can like keep pushing it up to the top.
right, because you
I'll
got to scroll
send it
down a
to
little
you.
bit, but it's like your feedback needed or something like that. And you click
Yeah.
on that and it takes you to the link.
Yeah.
And I
let
think
me
it's on our
forward it.
Berlin Neighbors Connect too.
I'll email it to you.
Okay.
Okay,
So speaking of ADA, as I mentioned last week, unfortunately, as we started to look at the pipes, we realized that there's a lot more work than just wrapping a pipe and adding a faucet. So we did get an estimate back from Plumber Man. That loud thud that you heard during the week was me falling off my chair when I saw his estimate per bathroom. So we have plan A, B, C, and D. The bad thing is that we have a lot of things to take care of on our ADA issues. The good thing is that we have a lot of things that we need to take care of so we can pivot. So we'll potentially look maybe at bathrooms. We're not going to be able to do them all. We're only going to be able to do about 3 of them. So we'll have to decide if we do 3, which ones. But I also reached out because Kristen, I don't know if you know this, on the grant, if we bought like the wrapping stuff for the pipes, could we buy it now and use it later? I don't know. And also where it's just not the faucet, it's all the guts underneath that need to be replaced, is that part of it? Because I don't want to buy it and put it under ADA funds. And then all of a sudden we get slapped and I have to come crawling on knees to you saying, can I please have $2,000 to cover this? So I did reach out to Evan, ADA grant guy, and asked him. So I'll find out. I'd rather be cautious than assume.
Mhm.
So plan A is plumber guy. Plan B is one electrical door to see if we can get the front door. You hit the button and the door opens to see with that, but we got to get a cost for electrician man. If we can't do that, then plan C is to potentially go to hearing devices, which the town also got dinged on, that we didn't have assisted listening devices. So there's some packages out there that Victoria has identified. We could probably do those. I know we kind of hesitated and scooted around 1870, not really wanting to touch anything because it's a historical, but if we're only going in there and adding a door pull and a little knob to lock the door, we might be able to get away with that. So we've got a few options to deal with, but it's already March. We need to get this done by June. So it's going to hurry up and come upon us. Clinton, I noticed, is promoting their Berlin takeover at Polar Park. That will be in May. So I reached out to my buddy Eric and said, hey, there's a nice little brochure that Clinton put out on the site. So can Berlin get theirs? And he's like, I'll get it back to you.
Okay.
He also offered to drop off Smiley again, Smiley the mascot. So I can find out when opening day is for Berlin baseball, Berlin softball, or Berlin Boylston softball. And maybe we drag the mascot around. And if I've got the brochures, I can hand them out. And he'll keep me posted as to how many tickets we've sold with the money going towards food pantry for that. And Sandra, I'm following up with Town Hall. She couldn't meet with me last week. And it was really nice to see the both of you at Read Across Berlin Day. It was very much fun. So, hey, since we were all there, maybe that's our jump to maybe going back to meeting in public, since we were all there and breathing on each other and, survived a week later. But that's all I got.
Good. I think that's our agenda then for tonight. If there's other questions or comments.
Would you like me to make the motion?
Sure.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Let's see. Hawkins, aye.
E5.
Stone Eye.